I mean, thought experiments in general are just great because it's like they really poke at like tough concepts in interesting ways and really help you to like figure out what you actually think. Like the one about taking your body and like deconstructing it and reconstructing it somewhere else, and like how that relates to consciousness. Like, is there a continuation there or not? Like, it kind of points you in that direction. It's like, well, what is consciousness about? And like to me, it seems like it's about the like experience of continuation.
Five, four, three, two, one, zero.
Yo, what's up? This is Boho Hobo, and we welcome you all back to Bindlism, a philosophy to a self-sufficient lifestyle. The purpose of Bindlism is to unlock authentic perspective as we create a community of like-minded individuals who are living a self-sufficient lifestyle. A self-sufficient lifestyle is one in which a human being is activating their self-awareness to curate an authentic life that keeps them sustained mentally, emotionally, and physically in their adventure towards self-fulfillment. Boho Hobo's mission is to support a community that fosters this culture. We will be interviewing a diverse group of people, including artists, creatives, entrepreneurs, and independent thinkers to make this happen. Please join us in this journey as we explore the world and broaden our horizons with discoveries of new perspective. Thank you to everyone who is taking the time to stop by on your journey to give us a listen. We hope you enjoy, and as always, explore endlessly. Welcome back. This is the Cam and Kyle podcast, featuring Kyle
And Cam.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
All right, what are we going to talk about today, Cam?
I don't know. You have something to pitch me, so.
Okay, let me...
Universal consciousness and intelligence and some theory of...
Simulation theory.
Okay, well, it's not that, though, is it? Or is it something else?
Okay, so the precursor conversation that we were having, we were talking about more like the biological creation, the Big Bang of the universe, essentially. So coming from that angle is very different than the angle I'm going to approach it from, because it's essentially totally like not even considering biology as like it's totally going around it, because you're coming from the angle of we might be in a simulation right now. So if that's the case, then biology only applies in this simulation, and different laws of the program, whatever it might be different in other simulations. I need a prompt. I don't know where to go with this. So universal consciousness, I think, was the original question.
So in our previous conversations, what I had been confused about, I guess, was it's mostly like, it seems to me like it might be a language barrier issue. That's a good place to start, I feel like. So terms like universal consciousness or universal intelligence,
it's very woo-woo and
they're
spiritual and like gurus, and
it's just undefined for me. So like, it's possible that I'm on board with what you're saying, but I just don't actually understand what you're saying. And part of that is me not understanding like what the words mean that you're saying, basically.
Okay,
so could you explain what universal consciousness means?
Okay, so I think the disconnect is that term is used a lot in the spirituality, like religions, or like more the Eastern practices of like enlightenment. So my argument is that a lot of the Eastern philosophical ideals or ideas could actually overlap with more of our Western thinking of the materialistic. So universal consciousness, universal intelligence, those are two different phrases but mean the same thing. So essentially, this might be easier just painting the picture moving forward, as opposed painting the picture. So if we were to create universal consciousness, as opposed to with enlightenment we're finding universal consciousness. So if we were to create universal consciousness, which is in line with the Western thinking of creation, so that's essentially saying that if we can create an internet that is able to have all of our consciousnesses with the use of brain-computer interfaces to be able to upload into a database of all these different conscious entities, and pair that up with artificial intelligence to create the thing they call singularity, then that gives rise to a platform which would be titled universal consciousness.
Okay, so how does that relate with the Eastern idea of universal consciousness? So let me give you where I'm coming from. So universal consciousness, as I understand it, is something like there's like something like an essence of consciousness that is like almost like in Star Wars, Star Wars, like metachlorians, how it's like the life-giving thing, about that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so anyway, there's it's basically like what makes something alive is a question, right? So it's like, is it an emergent thing, or is it like there's an essence that makes something alive? And this is, when I hear universal consciousness, what my conception of that is that it's talking about some kind of essence that gives an unconscious thing consciousness. So like you could have like, this drum pad and you give it this essence and it's conscious now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I understand when I hear universal consciousness. So that's where I'm coming from when I hear that. So is that like
what framework is that? Or? Is that like a philosophy? Is there a label of that thinking?
A framework.
Or is that something you just kind of concocted through your understanding?
That's just like as I've heard it talked about. That's what I've derived, I guess.
So universal consciousness is every piece of consciousness in the entire universe of all things is universal, because universal is everything. So totality of consciousness. So me being a conscious entity in the universe, I'm maybe a fraction of that universal consciousness. And then who knows, maybe that drum thing has some fraction of consciousness in it.
And so, all right, so to me, the question is then, what is useful about coupling, about joining together
the Eastern with the Western?
No, about joining together, like even just the term universal consciousness, like what, like I can understand, like, there are conscious entities, right? And so there's like, you can, not now,
like different levels of consciousness.
But maybe like, there's, you can measure consciousness and you could actually total it up and, get some sum of the consciousness, and that would be universal consciousness. Like I can understand that as a concept, but what I don't, like, I don't know that there's anything you can draw from that. Like, I don't, like, what's the utility of adding up all the consciousness and then calling it universal consciousness? Like, is there an inherent connection between my consciousness and yours?
Like, is there utility in knowing that?
Yeah, I guess, like, and can you, like, what do you use that,
okay, so,
that for?
That kind of aligns with the Eastern thinking of why you meditate. But let's stay in the focus of the Western thinking with the materialistic.
All right.
Just to paint that picture first, and then I can show you how it like ties into the Eastern. So essentially, if like, it's crazy to think, but in our generation, we're already talking about the possibility of uploading our minds into the digital realm, which is the internet, and then creating that database of all of our consciousnesses in a digital entity, and that immense amount of power that's going to be created from that. And then from that energy, through the use of like quantum computing power, it's going to produce probably like millions of different simulations from that database. So what we're kind of doing is like materializing all of that energy and all of our energy, because our energy is being uploaded into it, and then that's becoming like a system of sorts. And then from that energy, we're going to be creating like possibly millions of virtual reality simulations from that, so to speak.
One thing I'm kind of hung up on is the use of energy. Like, when you say energy, do you mean our consciousness or something else?
So Einstein said energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
I think that was Newton, but yeah, I think they all agree. Yeah,
sure. Newton said that. Yeah, he did say that.
I think they all do agree, though. I'm pretty sure.
So, do you agree?
I agree. Yes.
So if that's the case, then since we're materializing that energy into something that is practical, which is the universal consciousness,
energy,
the database.
What energy?
So if we're saying that energy cannot be created nor destroyed, then we're using energy from somewhere to be able to create a supercomputer that houses billions of people's minds, essentially.
Okay. So are you talking about like the electrical
energy
grid, like running the computer?
So it's not like we're creating the energy to be able to create a supercomputer. We're materializing that energy. So we're taking that energy from somewhere in the universe, materializing it into a supercomputer.
Yeah.
We're not creating that energy.
Right. We're transforming it. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So if that gives rise to a simulation that we're all like uploaded into many different virtual realities, who's to say that history doesn't repeat itself and that we're not already in a simulation? Right. And then if that's the case, then we could argue to say that we came from a universal consciousness or a database of simulations in this quantum computing supercomputer. And who's to say that we can't tap into it? So that's that now moving towards the Eastern thinking of like meditation. So they say ego. Ego is the barrier that's limiting my perception of the universe to this single body. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when you use meditation, you're essentially stripping yourself away from that ego. So then you can tap into that universal consciousness.
Okay.
So just like moving forward, that makes sense that we create the universal consciousness, which creates a simulation of sorts. Who's to say that we're not in a simulation that was created from a universal consciousness or database supercomputer from before? And then who's to say that since energy cannot be created nor destroyed, that we can't tap into that energy somehow through the use of meditation?
Yeah. So if I can paint what I understand, what I understand you to be saying. So it's like, I can get on board with this simulation theory. Like, this is totally plausible. Testable. At this point, I don't think anyone, unless they just came up with one tonight, I don't know if anyone has a good test for this. But so simulation, I can get on board with. Like from a speculative standpoint, like for sure that's possible. So I guess it rides on that we're in a simulation, and that like the meditation thing you're talking about is sort of like a hack.
We're hacking the system. We're hacking the simulation.
Right. Yeah. I mean that makes sense to me. So from a like logical standpoint, like it makes sense and is plausible. Is it testable or useful now? It's like that's like I can't make any claims about that. But it does make a lot more sense now that we've talked about it. I do get what you're saying more than I did when we were texting for sure.
But then it leads me to believe like all the stuff we were talking about before with the Big Bang Theory, that's just all programmed into our simulation. Who's to say that's not? And who's to say that even the memory or the history of it is not programmed into this generation? That we weren't just told a narrative, but that did it actually happen, or is that just the narrative that everyone's been programmed to believe? Yeah,
this whenever this comes up, it reminds me of a Vsauce video. You know Vsauce?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there was one. I can't remember what it was called. It was like I think it was like, "Did the past really happen?" I think is what it's called. All of those videos are really great, but that one. So that one talked about a bunch of interesting things and like pertaining to history and stuff like that, and like philosophical stuff. And one of the things that he talked about is I think it's called like the last Tuesday hypothesis or something like that. It's got a bunch of different names, I think, but it's the basic premise is that you can say like the universe was created like either 5 minutes ago or last Tuesday, and all of your memories of what happened before Tuesday or 5 minutes ago were just like they were created with the universe just 5 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of your memories are basically just it's just brain states, and
our perception of time is different than maybe the grand scale of how the time is in the universe.
Well, but basically, what you can do though, like you don't even need to worry about time and like any weirdness like that. Like you could just start the system up with my brain in this state, and it would like imagine like you have the like I think we all think the universe is like continuous, right? So it's like imagine like a tube of like things happening, right? If you could slice out like one I don't know time frame, right? Like one frame of time out of this tube of universe time happening. So like here's like the beginning of time, and here's like time continuing in this direction, right?
Yeah.
Like just us in this room. Imagine like somewhere in the middle, we cut like a slice, like right here. We cut this slice, okay? And we take all the information, all the what would be data. I mean, is information we still call in like physics, but you could imagine in a simulation it's data, right? It's like maps onto that directly. So you could take all that data, basically save the state of this frame in time, and then just boot that up, start it somewhere else, and it would just continue. Like from the beginning of that frame, it would still continue. I'd have all the memories of that happened before, but in this new like boot up, those things that didn't actually happen. I just have the memories of them.
Okay.
So that's like it's like a bunch of different names. I think it's like the last Tuesday hypothesis or something, something like that.
Similar to it's a okay.
Just an interesting thing that it reminded me of.
Like if you were to upload information from your computer to an external hard drive, or no, probably better, a camera. From a camera to a computer. So that camera has been through experience. Like you literally took that piece of hardware and you went out on a journey and you recorded that and documented it. So that camera was the one that experienced, like truly experienced that experience. But when you bring it to the computer, you're uploading that information, putting it onto there. The computer thinks in a way that it's experienced that.
Yeah.
Because it knows the information, but it hasn't.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah, right. And you can even do this without the camera having had the experience. Like, if we're getting metaphorical about it now, like if like with a sufficiently advanced modeling system, like you wouldn't have to run, for instance, like all of the Big Bang and all of the evolution of life on Earth. Like you could just start at this frame.
Just copy and paste and put it into our simulation. Right?
Yeah. Like you don't have to do the actual work of the beginning of time. You can just start in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Like you could just start right now.
But using that information that would be uploaded,
but you don't
right?
even have to. Like you don't even have to start with the Big Bang. Like
not physically, but the information that's stored in that, then you would take that information to put it in that slice of time frame, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. So yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah. So yeah.
Like this all happened.
You wouldn't actually have to run the beginning. You could just start here, and the beginning happened in air quotes. You know what I mean?
In that time frame, all the people in that section of time somehow got all of that information uploaded into us.
Yeah. All the memory of the past was inserted into like the initial frame.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know why. I forgot where we were that I thought of that, but it's always just an interesting thing to think about. Because it's like, it's one of those things that it's like, you could never know or test. Like how
simulation theory. Like,
how could you test?
Is that true?
How could you test if the universe was created 5 minutes ago?
Right.
you just can't, But and simulation theory seems to be in that same category where I don't think that it's actually testable. But I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of things that humans thought was not possible that then we did. It's like, I don't know.
So, like, laying out that framework of how on one side we're materializing universal consciousness, and on the other side, it's already happened, and we're like giving rise in this simulation from a different universal consciousness. Does that make sense? So a universal consciousness was created in a different simulation, which gave rise to this simulation, and we're in a simulation creating or materializing that energy into a universal consciousness to then give rise to new simulations.
Well, and what I would say also, like that does make sense, but I think you could even take out the consciousness aspect of it, because in theory you could have computers assembling and creating simulations without consciousness. Like it'd be really hard. I mean, I can't imagine a way that it would.
Well, no, we need consciousness, because if we don't have consciousness, then we can't create a supercomputer.
Well, the point is though, like, have you ever heard it's like it's like somebody's like typewriting monkey. I think it's like named after like some famous physicist or philosopher or something. But it's the basic idea is like if you have an infinite universe, like in size and time, and you had a bunch of monkeys just jamming on typewriters, you would eventually get like all of the works of Shakespeare written out, like without errors. Like because it's
if you wait long enough.
Yeah. I mean, like if you have infinite time and infinite monkeys and typewriters and a lot of ink, a lot of paper. I don't know where all the trees are; they're all deforested. But with in a long enough time, like you would have one of those monkeys would type out all of the works of Shakespeare without errors. So like, in theory, that's possible. In practice, like we don't have an infinite universe or time. So yeah, like it's not really practical that a supercomputer could assemble itself just by chance in that way and create another simulation.
Mm-hmm.
But in theory, it's possible without consciousness. Like you could get like even if you take off the monkeys, because you could say the monkeys are conscious. Like you could just like have a bunch of typewriters floating around and banging into each other, and like it would take longer, I guess, but still you have infinite time. It would happen eventually.
And none of them are conscious.
None of them are conscious. Yeah. So in theory, you could get to the simulation without consciousness, but it's like really improbable that would happen.
And what if we could argue to say that?
I guess I just made that distinction just to point out that like I don't think that the universal consciousness is inherently tied to the idea of being able to tap into like hack into the energy of the previous simulation.
Okay, so to add on that, just to add another layer to the framework, so moving to the materializing, that's in the objective. So like the objective reality that we're in right now, so we're trying to basically channel energy to objectify into something that's like practical and touchable, like in our external reality. And that's the universal conscious on that side. But then on the other side of the spectrum, with the Eastern practice, that's all inward. That's all subjective. Like anyone who becomes an enlightened being, that's not testable. But that person who claims to be enlightened knows that they've tapped into something. So it's creating this spectrum now, where on one side it's fully objective, and then on the other side it's fully subjective. And so like what we have is this energy flowing from the extreme of subjectivity to the objectivity of this simulation that we're in. Does that make sense? And it's the same energy flow.
Well, that's what I might take issue with, is that like that they're the same thing, because I don't think that we actually know that. So I mean, maybe you're like proposing it as a hypothesis that they are the same thing, but I think that's in the realm that at least at this point we don't know. Like if we take on board the assumption that there's a simulation and it's hackable, through meditation or through, I just picture like Interstellar. You know how he was like in the black hole. You remember that the movie Interstellar? Oh, you didn't see that one, really? Wow, I thought you would have seen it.
I don't watch many movies.
Yeah, that's all right. But anyway, so it's similar to like a Matrix kind of thing, where you can like
get out of the system.
You can kind of tweak the system in a way that it doesn't make sense to us. Like you can be like sort of outside the system and like play with it and stuff like that. So
and that's essentially what you're doing when you're meditating.
Right. So if we take on board the assumption that yes, we are in a simulation and we do have access to hack it in some way, like maybe meditation is a way, maybe connecting with like supercomputers through a brain interface or something can like overpower the simulation or something like that, and then you can like get into the back door or whatever. But at this point, I don't think that we know that those are the same hacks, like that they are inherently the same thing. Like they might be related, and they might just be related in the sense that they're hacks, but I don't know that.
It's just interesting that those are the only two hacks.
Inherently
connected. Well, I guess I can't claim this, but I will anyway. Just like those are the only two hacks that we kind of know of in this
But we
simulation.
don't even know they're hacks.
That's true too.
I mean, like we can theorize that they're hacks,
Mm-hmm.
but that again rests on the assumption that we're in a simulation, which I'm perfectly fine with like taking on board for any discussion, unless it's like something that's relevant to I don't know. I guess we don't need to go there, but
and to add another layer to this, so ego. So since we're in this simulation that has, because energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So we could argue to say that universal consciousness, all of that energy that's creating this simulation right now is flowing through all of us. Like the whole notion of the Eastern practice that
right, because
we
the
are
computer
one
is made
with,
out of the previous simulation.
right.
Yeah.
So the reason why I think that we only have these like singular points of views, it's like a subdivision of consciousness, that my consciousness, you can't see into mine, I can't see into yours, is because of ego. So like I said, those are the barriers between all of us. So the more we let go of that ego, the more we become, so to speak, one with the universe. Same thing with like psychedelics. Maybe there's some hack into that. Oh, that's another thing we could bring into. But yeah, it's somehow removing us from that like barrier that's limiting our perception of reality, so to speak.
So,
and then same on the other side of the spectrum with the materialization, it's like you have to lose your ego to be bold enough. Well, not really. You have to just upload, but like by uploading, you're going to hypothetically lose your ego, which is rooting you in this physical reality, this simulation.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying is that like the Eastern idea of, and maybe I'm mischaracterizing the Eastern, like the actual Eastern idea of like becoming one with the universe, but like what it sounds like is that you're thinking that like by becoming one with the universe or something, you can tap into other people's consciousness, like
to the universal consciousness.
Okay.
Not your consciousness.
Okay, right. So what if we both tapped into it? Like, do we have like, can we tap into each other's minds then or something?
Well, I mean, there's crazy accounts where people can somehow like telepathically communicate with each other through this practice of meditation.
Yeah, I would like to see that like tested and verified and stuff before I would like accept it as a piece of evidence. But
and that's the hard part. It's not.
It's not what testable.
Unless we somehow can monitor brainwaves, and
I mean we can.
Like, yeah, true.
So like if we got two people who were like we can telepathically communicate, like we could definitely set up an experiment. But to my knowledge, that hasn't been done. Yeah, so I mean it's. Yeah, it's like a lot of the stuff is it's hard to make claims about. Definitely you can theorize about it, but if you're going to make claims about it like being reality, like ultimately for me it has to go through a test. Like it has to be like, for me to believe it, I have to be convinced of it, and not by just like, isn't this interesting and wouldn't it be nice kind of thing, you know?
So like with Eric Weinstein's theory of everything, when he got to that claim, was he able to test that that's the correct formula for the theory of everything?
I don't think so. No, I think like he has a framework that he thinks could work, and it still needs to go through a lot of like it needs to be reviewed and like put through the ringer. So, yeah, like I nor anybody else like is going to just accept that as the truth. I mean, even he's not like this is the truth. Like I mean, I've heard him say, I'm sure you have too. Like this still needs to be like tested and stuff. Like like this is a theory that I'm putting out, or a hypothesis or theory. I forget what the like technical affiliation is or name is for it, but yeah, like it's not like it's fact yet, and like he wouldn't claim that. It still has to be run through tests and like peer review and whatever and stuff to find holes in it.
I think the way I got to this conclusion was just getting a lot of narratives, so a lot of different stories, and then using if-then statements to prove like if this is true, then this will happen. kind of thing. And so I got all of these different stories, and I've realized that if this framework is true, then all of the stories that encompass that framework would also be able to fit in that framework. So like taking all these stories and trying to find that overarching theme that links all of them. And I think that's how I was able to get to this conclusion, because they all those stories of like, whether it's religion, Big Bang Theory, simulation theory, universal consciousness, supercomputers, like they all are able to fit in this narrative. And then that like reaffirms the belief, even though it's an assumption, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's not testable, but like it's testable through the narrative, which is like not science. It's more of an art form. Not even, I don't even know what to call it. It's like philosophy. Yeah, it's probably more so philosophy.
Yeah. It's like if there maybe there's a name for this, but it's like something like the art of like coming up with hypotheses or something.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know if there's a name for that. Just hypothesizing, I guess.
Like by answering questions, you get to newer questions, which give you better questions to get to.
Yeah, but something. I guess a lot of it doesn't always interface with, or I guess there's a risk that it won't necessarily interface with like with science, like testability, I guess, because like if you build it all up on assumptions and stuff like that and stuff that isn't testable, you can go like way off on this arc of if-thens, which are, you know, standing at the base on assumptions, like things that aren't testable, like simulation theory, for instance.
Like the original assumption is wrong. Yeah. So that means all of
it's
wrong.
Or not even necessarily wrong, but untestable. So it's like you can go on a long tangent, a huge arc on like, what if we are in a simulation? Like, okay, let's accept that we are in a simulation, and then build a ton of stuff on that. But it's like, what if that core assumption is wrong, and like we don't know that it's right? So like, what is this arc? Like, what does arc actually mean?
Right.
Like, is it useful or not? And until it's testable, like whether your base assumption is true, all of this stuff is kind of just like, it's like, all right, we'll put that, like we'll wait for that until we know if we're in a simulation. Like it's good. It's good that like the work is done in advance, but until the assumption of we're in a simulation is verified, like that work isn't really accessible for actual use.
Can't be proven true.
Yeah, and therefore like it can't really be used. I mean, like some of it can be used like in a theoretical way, or like abstracted from the arc, I guess. But yeah, like until you know that your base assumption is right, like all of this like arc that's built on it is kind of like inaccessible for use.
That makes sense.
Just because it doesn't actually interface with what we know as the real universe. So, and that's kind of like, I guess what you would say. I'm not going to pretend like I understand geometric unity, but the way that I imagine that, or any other hypothesis or theory, is like it's a construction on some like new assumptions or something that have to be verified. Like I forget what the famous experiment was. It was like some solar eclipse or something. Einstein, I think it was relativity. I think it was general relativity. This was like early 1900s or whatever. So Einstein had developed this theory of general relativity, and he was like, okay, here is the theory, and everyone's like, well, we got to test this. Like, I mean, like we don't know if this is interfacing with reality or not. And he's like, all right, well, we can test it at the next solar eclipse. Like, we can do this whatever test, and we can figure out like if we get this result, it means that this is accurate. Like, more or less, that was what it is. And the solar eclipse came, they did whatever test, and it was verified. And it's like, oh, well, now, like, okay, general relativity is accessible and useful. But until it was verified, it was just a theory that we didn't know if we could use yet.
Makes sense. Same thing with like simulation theory.
Yeah. So, so like we can test all of those things that are built on simulation theory and see if see if those work. Like if there was an experiment you could do, like if we are in a simulation, then we can do this and this will be the outcome. If we do that thing and that is the outcome, and like your logic follows, right? Like then we're in a simulation. I just don't think there's anything that we can do like that.
Well, for the individual, I think the best thing that they could do if they wanted to experience it is see if they can become enlightened.
Yeah. But that to me is like, that's, I can see how like that could be acceptable for somebody, but like,
so
for me coming from like it has to be scientifically verified. Like that's not the scientific method, So it's like anyone's subjective experience, like we can't just use that as like, that's the basis for truth.
Yeah, definitely not. It's not fact-based, not logic. But like it gives a narrative that I think is inspiring enough or like logical enough to someone who is rational minded to be like, oh, maybe I'll consider meditating now because maybe there's something out there. Because what I've seen, especially in like the spirituality community, is that it's not rooted in like a solid foundation of like definitely not science, but like even to go to the extent of there's not a lot of logical, like rational frameworks around it. And I don't know, like just thinking about it in terms of this way, it like brings in a little bit more of science to why maybe like enlightenment is possible, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, to comment on like the idea of like convincing a rational person to meditate, like I would advocate for it. It's good. Like, and there is like, if you are a scientific person, like there's data showing, like you can look it up and find the benefits of meditating. So it is beneficial, yeah.
But like enlightenment specifically, like yes, we've seen it's testable that people do have greater well-being through meditation, just through like surveys and stuff like that. But like the whole notion that if you meditate, you can get to a point of enlightenment, we don't really have any solid frame science to back that up necessarily.
Yeah, and that's something I don't know if is testable. I guess it would require a definition of what enlightenment looks like. So like obviously like before you test anything, like before you say, oh, like is this person enlightened, we're gonna measure it. It's like, okay, well you have to know what you're measuring.
That's true, yeah.
Like are you measuring someone's dopamine levels? It's like, okay, well we can just give them heroin. It's like, oh, they're enlightened now. So like we have to get our hands around what enlightenment actually means before we can measure it. Maybe there is a good model of that I don't know of, but
well, I know there's this guy called Joe Dispenza. He's like working on it right now, and he has this community where he is talking about these kind of concepts, and he's a neuroscientist. So he's getting the people to these levels of like enlightenment, so to speak, through meditation, and he's measuring their brain waves and everything. And there is something going on there.
For sure. I imagine that there is. I mean, similar to, and I'm not saying it's just this because I don't actually know, and I've never been enlightened. But like, for instance, like on DMT or something, also never done DMT. But like, you'll hear people describe very similar accounts. First of all, like the experiences have a lot of, like from person to person, they have a lot of similarities. Like people describe the experience as like more real than real. That's a very interesting thing. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, like these, like those experiences don't tell you if that's actually real or not. Like it might feel like it's more real than real, like on DMT, like whatever you're experiencing. But does that tell you that it is actually real? And this is like an epistemology kind of like, oh, like what is real? It's like, oh, nothing is real except for me because I think therefore I am. Like that was like the whole Descartes thing. He's like, we don't know anything. So ultimately it can all be reduced down to that. But yeah, I think I don't think that it's, I wouldn't accept, like if I tripped, and I don't know for sure, but I imagine that if I had some experience on DMT, I would come back still recognizing that that was a brain state and that exists in my subjective experience, but does it exist like in an objective way? Like by that I mean like
Right.
does it exist absent an observer? And I would say no to that.
Because it's like if you went and saw a movie that was like mind blowing, you could argue say that was more real than real, but it's not real. It's just a movie. It's like a hyped up version of reality, and that's possibly what a trip is. It's just a hyped up version of reality. Like why would they argue this? Why would they say it's more real than real?
Well, I mean, like there, you can have. I can imagine what it is like to have a feeling that something is more real than real. Like I can kind of, I can like dip my toe into that and like understand it, in a small way. But like I mean, I've never experienced it, so maybe I'd be really convinced by the experience. But for me, sitting right here, I would tell you that I would hope that I would still recognize that that was just an experience and that it was not. Like I hope that like my logical brain would go out the window and be like, "Oh, it felt real, so it must have been real," you know?
Yeah, and I think the people that I've heard that say that are more rooted in this sense of like they believe their feelings rather than logic. Like if you look at Cognitive Functions by Carl Jung, he essentially was able to find themes like archetypes of people, and he subdivided them out to then being like either more rational minded where people trust their facts, and then people that are more subjective, trusting that and making decisions based off of their feelings. So I think there's some alignment with that, with his ideas sense, and what's being presented with like people's belief structure.
Yeah, I'm sure that people are more or less inclined to like have one set of thought patterns or another. I think I'm probably more on the I guess we all have like an intuitive sense, and like Jonathan Haidt, you know Jonathan Haidt? Okay, well,
I have.
He's great. Jonathan Haidt's
all your
great.
references.
It's fine. It's fine. No, but Jonathan Haidt's great. And one thing that I took from him was, I think he's a professor. Last I knew at NYU, I think he still is, of like business ethics. But yeah, so he's done work in like psychology, like the field of psychology and stuff, and philosophy also stuff. And yeah, so one thing that I gathered from him was, and I think he might have got this from somebody else, but I've heard him articulate this, that it was like it's this idea of motivated reasoning. So like we think that we start with all the facts and then we put the facts into our brain and then out comes what we should do. Where really what it is more like is we get, we experience whatever, we have a feeling about what we want to do, and then we rationalize that. Like we bend the facts or like omit certain ones or like overvalue certain ones, so that we can justify like what our intuition or our feeling wants us to do. So it's called motivated reasoning. I forget if it's I don't think it's his idea. I think it's someone else's. I forget who, but so we all have that in us, like the
and we're all
we start with our intuition, and we often start with what we want to do, and then we rationalize it. Like that's kind of how we're built.
And the interesting thing is that any bit of information that me or you are receiving is coming from another source, another human being, unless you like physically like experience that experience yourself. But if it's like on the internet, it's coming from another source, so you have to make sure that that source is reputable. So just the fact that you're getting, it's like the telephone game, like making sure that that source got truthful facts from the source that they got their information from. So like there's a lot of area and possibility for some disconnect of lies to be put in.
Yeah.
In that chain of information flow.
Yeah. And just to close up like why I brought that up, the Jonathan Haidt thing is because I think it's very useful to recognize that. Like if you don't recognize that, you'll just operate that way without any hope of like counteracting it. Like you'll just act like that process is natural. And like if you don't realize it's happening, you're not going to be able to get in the way of it. So I think it's really useful to recognize that because it allows you to like just be conscious of like, okay, I know that I have this process that's in me that wants to just start with my initial feeling and rationalize what I want to do and bend the facts around. So I'm going to be extra careful to not bend the facts around and like to actually follow this logically. And I think that's super useful. Like unless your life is working out great for you and like you're living intuitively and it's working out great, like that's fine. But I think it's to me it seems like a better long-term strategy. But I guess I don't know. I'm very young. I don't know. It just seems like a safer option, like to act logically rather than intuitively, because your intuitions can be wrong. Mm-hmm. And often our intuitions are really good, but like they.
Do you believe that you can make logical intuition? Is there any crossover with that?
What would that look like?
I guess Elon Musk, for instance, like he works by first principles theory, so he takes into account every piece of information that he's taking in to use for creation of something. He makes sure that all those pieces are truthful, and if one of them isn't, then that goes into the trash pile. But so like think of it in terms of you have all these bits of information, they all end up being true, and then taking into account all of that truth and then making a leap of faith, like intuition from all that information, as far as like, okay, that's the conclusion. Mm-hmm. Like I guess in this instance it would be him believing or making the intuitive leap that it will be possible, create a sustainable world, to be able to go to Mars, to be able to create reusable rockets. They're all rooted in truth because he's developed this like framework of truth that's like related to our reality, the physics of reality. But he's still making that leap of faith with the claims that he's making that this is going to be possible.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that falls more into a framework of like assumption. Like he's writing on the assumption that, for instance, like we don't get hit by a giant asteroid or something. Is it intuition?
It would have to be because it's not observable. Because it's not observable yet that we can go to Mars.
I mean, yeah, but I guess like it is logical that, like in theory, we could. I guess I just don't know what.
So I guess
what a crossover of logic and intuition would be. I mean, I guess the way that I would like the most readily, the easiest one to think of is like you make an intuition, and then you test it with logic. I think that's like most commonly their relationship. I don't know what another relationship would be between them. I'm not saying there isn't. I just can't think of one. But that's very common. Like someone will start with like just some interesting observations, and they're like, that's interesting how they correlate in this way. Like I wonder if this is a thing. And then you can test it and like through a logical process verify it. I think that's like probably most commonly their relationship, but
well, it's inductive versus deductive. So inductive is taking in objective facts from the world, deducing it, or and then making a hypothesis from that. whereas deductive is looking at associations, or it's like
Well, deductive is like taking.
I'm gonna botch this.
No, you have it pretty much right. So inductive, you have it right. So, like a good example that I saw recently was like, you have like a list of years and then the population. It's like a city population or something. So you have like the 80s, 90s, 2000s, whatever, and like a list of populations, and it's like increasing by at some kind of rate. And the question is like, okay, what is so let's say you have it listed up to 2010. And the question is, what is the approximate population of is going to be the approximate is what is going to be the population of this city in 2020? And let's say it's not 2020 yet. You don't actually know what it's going to be. I mean, an asteroid or a nuke could like just wipe out the city, or everyone could move away. I mean, that'd be much nicer. I don't know why I went right to nuke. And let's just say like everyone could move away. But inductive reasoning is like seeing that there's a pattern of it's increasing by about 200,000 a year or something, and then you could reason. Inductive reasoning would tell you it's going to be about 200,000 higher in 2020. I think I messed up some words in there, but yeah, like you understand the concept. But deductive reasoning though is like taking a set of facts and saying if this is true and this is true, then this is true.
It's association based off of, or it's like assuming that.
Well, it's
like not taking the objective reality. It's like it's more belief based, maybe. Deductive
reasoning?
Yeah, more subjective.
No, I'm trying to think of a good example of deductive reasoning. Like, if
I'm just gonna Google it.
Like if 1 + 1 is 2, then 2 - 1 is 1. That's deductive reasoning.
Say that again.
So if a good example of deductive reasoning, I'm sure there's better ones, but this is just like one that is like easy that I thought of. Is like if 1 + 1 is 2, and let's say that we understand what plus and minus means and like what numbers are, like what values are. If 1 + 1 is 2, then 2 - 1 is 1. That would be deductive reasoning. I'm sure there's like better examples that are more like eye-opening and interesting, but that's just one that I thought of. But yeah, so we're talking about Elon, and
so like one of his things
he would be reasoning. It's inductive reasoning. It's not deductive reasoning. It's not.
He works very efficiently in inductive reasoning, which is first principles. So like his ideas are like, okay, you're trying to create a car. What was it? Like you have a car and you're trying to make it fly, right? So if you were thinking in terms of like analogy, you would be like, oh, just put wings on the car and then it would be able to fly. But if you look at it from first principles, it's like, no, look at what's true and the purpose of it. And then it gets you to like, oh, well, we don't need the wheels. We don't need all this other stuff. It's just extra. And then let's just make a jet. So it's like trying to eliminate associations based of like preconceived notions and just going straight to, okay, what's the purpose of this? And then working from the framework of, okay, what's true in achieving that final goal? And then skipping all the like middleman work.
Yeah.
Of everything in between.
This was what struck really well for me, like watching the Battery Day presentation when he was talking about the just the manufacturing process of the batteries and how it was like this long drawn out process of like a lot of just like legacy processes, like when the industry started, like this is how they made it, and it's just like continued because that's how they've always done it. But it's not efficient when like you're looking at this whole process, you can streamline it a lot. And that's like the first principle saying, like looking at like what is the whole thing, and then how like what's the shortest line between there? Like, do we have to go like this,
or just recreating a new system based off of their goals that they need to be achieved?
Yeah, exactly. That's what he does and what it is, or he and his team. Obviously, it's not just him. But
to kind of like step back from Elon Musk, just curious, do you believe that enlightenment is real, that can be achieved?
Again, this would depend on like someone would have to define enlightenment.
Like the Buddha, what they consider enlightenment.
I guess
through
I don't.
that
Maybe I
narrative.
don't really know what that is. Like, I think there might be two different conceptions of that. One is very woo woo, and one is like still rooted in like material reality.
So there's two extremes here. So I think in our materialistic world, a lot of people think enlightened beings are people that are all knowing. That the term woke is people that have higher consciousness to understand like the system and how everything's happening in our physical reality. But then on the Eastern side, which is like totally on the opposite side of the spectrum, becoming enlightened is actually like more in line with losing that ego and tapping into the universal consciousness. So the thing that's interesting about that is on the one side, the quote unquote woke people, they're actually fulfilling more of their egoistic drives because they're still being rooted in this physical reality, which is interesting because they say that ego is the we suffer because of ego. So I don't know if this is true or testable, but it's interesting to me that people that are very like logical or intellectual minded, that they become, a lot of them like they suffer a lot. And is there some equation that is like, are they like becoming more rooted in the physical reality that is like causing more and more like this tension of like controlling everything? And then on the other side, like if they could just let that go, but with that is like very like scary because you're letting go all of that knowledge and accumulation of like things going on in your head, essentially.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, sorry. So you started with.
Do you believe enlightenment
Do I believe
is real?
Enlightenment is real. Yeah. So
maybe you were thinking that enlightenment was like the accumulation of knowledge, but in the Eastern thinking with the Buddha, it's actually like letting go of all of that and just becoming one with the universe.
So I mean, like the short answer is yes. I believe enlightenment is real. But I don't find that might be very useful. Like as I understand it, I believe like enlightenment is real. Or like I can read that charitably and say yes, it's real. But like it depends on what someone calls enlightenment, or like what enlightenment is to somebody. Like if enlightenment is a state of feeling oneness, a state of if basically it comes down to like if enlightenment is a subjective thing or an objective thing.
I think it's subjective.
Yeah. So like that I can get on board with.
Wait, is it? It would have to be, because it's almost like you let go of your ego, but you're still like bound to the subjectiveness of your perception to be able to experience universal consciousness.
Yeah. Like, so something objective would be like, yeah, I said it before, like it exists, like this state of enlightenment exists absent an observer. And I don't think that makes any sense. So like, I don't think that like enlightenment is a place that exists like in the universe. I think it's like a brain state, and like that necessitates that there's a brain, like an observer.
Well, I think there's some,
and I think sorry to cut you off, but like I think sometimes that people maybe not enlightenment. There's other things that are similar enough that people will conflate them, like that enlightenment is like a place that you go, or like there is an essence of consciousness that you like tap into. And like as a metaphor, like this can make sense, but like it comes down to whether you're tapping into it in a like subjective sense, like it's the experience of tapping into it, or if objectively you are tapping into something that exists absent of an observer.
My theory is, and they've sort of done research into this, is that you're actually achieving a state of brain waves that mimic the waves of universal consciousness. So whatever that life energy is, whatever that source of energy that's creating quote unquote this simulation, there's a frequency to that. So when you let go of your ego, which is operating at a certain frequency, then you're able to allow your brain to sync up with that. It's like the synchronicity of brainwaves, of your brainwaves to the waves of that energy source.
Yeah, I don't know if that there's any measurement of like an energy source or anything like that. I mean, I guess it would come down to like the definition of energy. Like it's just all definition games. It's like, what did someone mean by energy? And like the energy of the simulation, like the frequency of the simulation. I don't know if that's been tested or anything like that. I mean, is it possible that there's something like that where there's something like a vibration or something like a frequency pattern that is like based on like the physical hardware of the simulating computer, the computer that's simulating the universe? Like, I mean, I can imagine that. Like, I can map, like, for instance, if there's like a frame rate or something. Like, if there's like a frame rate to the simulation, can I imagine that you could like break the frame rate or something by some hack? Like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't think that has been. I don't think that's been observed, or maybe like we've observed it, and we don't know what it is. Like, I'm sure that there's like weird mysteries of physics, and it's like, well, what is this? Like, why is there? Like, one thing that came to mind was like the question of like, is the universe quantized or not? I think we've talked about this a little bit. Like, is there a smallest divisible unit, or is the universe infinitely divisible? So like if we imagine that it's like there's a quantized like smallest unit like of time and of space, that sounds a lot like what we know as like a computer, like a video. Like you have pixels, which are like the space, and you have the frame rate, which is time. So like it's possible to imagine that. I don't think that there's, maybe there is. I don't think that there's a consensus on that at this point. I could be wrong about that. I don't actually know.
Okay, so I pose the question of, do you think you can experience enlightenment? So that would be,
is it real? Yeah.
Is enlightenment real? Okay, so that highlights more of the idea that we can like lose our ego to unlock universal consciousness, which is like with the Eastern principles. So then on the other side of the spectrum, we're getting more into the Western like materialistic thinking. So the crossover with that is, can you upload your consciousness into a digital database of sorts that's AI superpowered to be able to link to that universal consciousness?
So here's what I would say. I think there is a
and if you can do that, can you can your consciousness, can you actually be conscious of that? Like when you upload, is it this consciousness that I'm in right now uploading into it, and is that going to still be me, or is it just going to be an upload and it just becomes a separate entity of this perception of reality that I'm in?
Yeah, so I think there's an illusion of your consciousness, and this is going to sound very Eastern, but like it's not like it's your consciousness. Like there's a thought experiment where we take Kyle and we put him in some machine that takes all of his atoms apart. It like saves the state of whatever you are. It takes all your atoms apart, puts them in a box, sends them to Mars, and then another computer, another machine puts it all together into you. Is that still you? It's like, I don't know. It's made up of all my parts. Like it's put together the exact same way. Like I guess. Okay, so how about if instead we take Kyle, instead of taking them all apart completely, somehow we scan him and we get a model of a complete model of his atomic structure and all the relevant factors, whatever. And then we send the data. We don't send the atoms. We send the data to a computer, another machine that assembles another Kyle. So now we have two Kyles.
Yeah.
Which one's you? Like, is the other one conscious?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, did we double your consciousness? Like, do you have experience?
And am I
with this
over
guy?
there,
Are you
or am
over
I
there,
here?
Or are you here? Right. So I think there's kind of an illusion of the consciousness being yours, where the illusion tells you that the consciousness is yours, but really, as I see it, the consciousness is like an emergent property of a collection of, you know, a cellular, you know, atomic structure, whatever, an atomic, you know, atoms making molecules, making cells that are put together in a tissue that make some kind of structure, and then out of all of that comes consciousness. So would it be you in the simulation? Like, if you upload your mind to the simulation, is that you? I mean, it's kind of similar to, like, it's to cloning you on Mars, right? Like scanning you, taking all your information, and then building another you on Mars in this machine. It's not really your consciousness. It's just an entity that is conscious. So, like, would it be you? Like, do you die? Like, how about when you go to sleep? Like, is that you in the morning when you wake up? Or, like, how about, like, in the next moment? Like, your brain's different than it just was.
And our biologies are constantly being recycled, but, like, dying and regenerating.
Yeah.
So, like, the biology, the hardware makeup of me is different than it was 10 years ago.
Or 10 seconds ago.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, it's like every instant that passes, like, you're different than you were.
Yeah. But I'm still in this body. So that's the thing that's interesting, is, like, one thing that I was thinking about was when you get a new phone, like iPhone, for instance, they upload all of that information in that iPhone into a new iPhone. So in that sense, if we considered our iPhones to be conscious beings, does the consciousness in that sense transfer from one phone to another? And then what happens when you just destroy the old phone? Is that like a death of consciousness, or is it like, because in my thoughts, like, on this is, like, consciousness could be just information being transferred. It's not necessarily the hardware, because, like, you have two different phones, and, like, you're upgrading to a new hardware, but the information that's stored is being replicated.
Yeah, and that's like what your brain is doing right now. Like, there's molecules, like, zipping in and out of your body and your brain all the time. Like, you're not who you were just an instant ago. Like, so it's almost like you're like an imposter who's taken over the body. Like, in each moment, you're an imposter who took over the body of you in the last instant. So the consciousness is like, it's like an experience of, it's like, I guess it's like an experience of the continuation of time. But it's similar to, like, how we're talking about, like, you can slice a section of the universe and start it up from the middle. It's like, that's you all the time, basically. Like, you're started, like, the you is just like, you take any slice of you and it has the previous memories that your brain has stored. Like, that I'm trying not to use the word your, but, like, that your brain is stored. So, like, any slice of you right now, this slice did not live the last 5 minutes. But it's taking, like, it has all the memory of it. And because each moment in succession, like, you keep that, you just experience it as, like, a continuous thing, and you feel like it's been me all along. But really, like, each moment, like, you're an imposter who's taken over the body of you in the last moment.
So, like, bringing in the concept of Schrodinger's cat, like, you put something in a box, and it was like a cat in a bomb or something.
It was like a poison something, or
and it creates, like, two different paths of that possible reality, so to speak.
The cat's dead or alive, yeah.
So, like, same situation with me. Like, I'm sitting here, and I could either walk up just randomly, walk out the door.
Very strange if you do that.
Or I could stay here.
Yeah.
So it's two separate realities, because I've had the conscious thought of, oh, I could be doing that right now. So, like, then in time, space continuum, so to speak, it's creating, like, the two slices, so to speak. So now it's like copy and pasting to like a replica of this experience with the experience of me possibly getting up and going out of your room. So like, why is it that I am staying in this experience rather than going into the other experience? Same thing with Schrodinger's cat. It splits off into two possibilities, but you only stay in one possibility. But like the other one exists, so to speak.
Right, and so to speak is the key phrase, because I don't personally I don't see that there's an actual branching nature of like now two universe exists. I think it's more metaphorical. So yeah, like it exists, so to speak, like in theory it exists.
I'm just trying to figure out what is the thing that's like keeping me locked into this body and not being able to like go off and be enlightened all the time and tapping into universal consciousness. Or like if we're uploading into a simulation, is my conscious perception staying with me when I upload, or is it just copy and pasting me and some other being is now living in a different simulation?
Well, yeah, I mean that's what's happening every moment in you. like consciousness is just the feeling of continuation. So like if you took all your whole brain, if you took your entire brain, mapped it out, made it into a computer, or like you made it out of silicon, like, so it's not me
exact
anymore.
replica.
It's an exact replica. It's got all of the relevant data that that builds your experience, like what you experience as like consciousness. You make that out of some other material. You make that into a computer, and it's again just the same way as you each second is an imposter of the you the previous second. Like it's took your brain state, made it onto a computer, and it has all the memories. So it's just, I mean, it feels like it continued. Yeah, for sure.
The same thing.
Is it you? Like, I think the problem is like there's an illusion that there is a you.
So the same thing could be happening if you're a vlogger and you just document all of your experiences and you put them on the internet. There is a you that's a digital entity that's living on that will surpass your lifetime. So when you die, does your consciousness, so to speak, still live on in that digital universe? Well, and then is it like me right now? Is it living? Yeah. So,
yeah, I mean, like,
but the same thing might happen.
The realm of consciousness, I think. Like, if it's a video, like, that's a record of your experience in a way. Like, it's like the video, when the video plays, it doesn't actually experience the experience. Like when the video plays, it's just like a record of like.
Because it lacks dimensions that is existing in this.
Because it's not your brain. It's not like a complex thing like your brain. It's just a set of instructions. It shows like it's almost like an icon of the experience, I guess. Like it's not the actual experience itself.
But could we argue to say that the same essence of that is going to be this, like, similar to when we're able to transfer information, like from my conscious being into a conscious digital mind? That transfer of information, is it essentially the same?
What kind of information do you mean? Do you mean like replicating your brain?
Yeah, the replication of the brain, and then just like copying, pasting my experiences right now into a digital brain.
What about it? Like, is it possible?
Is there any like similarities between doing that to me? I mean, this is so
like vlogging. You mean?
Yeah, vlogging.
I'd see them as different because like I said, like a vlog is more like an icon of like, it's more like an icon of here's what this experience would be like, but it doesn't have the same like continuation, like feeling of continuation, because it's just the icon. It's not the actual experience. It's an icon of the experience. Like that's what a video is. Whereas like if you're replicating your brain, like it actually is replicating your brain and the experience. So like it's the actual experience.
And all the hopefully the same like chemical makeup too.
Well, I mean, yeah, if that falls into like the relevant information that encapsulates your whole experience, then yeah. But I have a feeling that you wouldn't actually need like to use the same like materials of of a brain. I don't think you actually have to make it out of meat to make it a conscious brain. Like, in theory,
It could just be ones and zeros.
yeah, in theory, you could make it out of just what we make computers out of, and
Well, it might not
provided that you actually do understand all of the relevant variables, you could build it out of silicon.
I actually don't even think it needs to be physical. Like,
So,
imagine
right.
if there's a brain-computer interface that's connecting my brain to the internet, and they have some software database program that has like a database of billions of digital minds on there, then it's all that information stored in
But ultimately,
that program.
ultimately, it comes back to some piece of hardware, like the cloud, like what we Google Drive. Like, it's in the cloud, but it's like it's stored on a physical hard drive somewhere.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
it all comes
Okay.
back to like a physical thing.
So whatever a quantum computer's made out of.
Yeah, or like a classical computer, like whatever it's made out of. Yeah.
But yeah, the biggest thing that I ponder is what will happen when we upload our minds.
Yeah, so I guess if you can imagine what it would be like for someone to scan you and then rebuild a copy of you on Mars, that's what it would be like.
And would I be in Mars?
I
Like,
mean,
what if they killed me?
well,
My biological
well, if
body.
so maybe it's more like it's what it would be like if they put you in the machine, scanned you, took all your atoms apart, shipped them to Mars, and then reassembled them on Mars. That's what it'd be like.
But again, would I be in Mars or would I be here?
Well, no, because we took all your atoms. There isn't 2 U's. There's 1 U. We took all your atoms,
So
we put them in a box, shipped them to Mars, and reassembled you on Mars.
So I would be in Mars.
It'd be just like that, yeah.
But the thing is with the mind uploading thing is you're copying your brain. You're not destroying your brain and creating a new one at the same time.
Yeah. So I mean, either way, like, pick which one. I mean,
There's two different outcomes though.
right, but there again, it's like the illusion that there is a you and that you are being duplicated. Where what actually is happening is that, like I've said, every instant, you're a new you. Like, you're not who you were a second ago.
But there's no two me's right now.
Well, right, because they're getting constantly replaced. Yeah, like, yeah, because your physical body is changing, and then like it's the new body. There's an old body that's left behind.
But in this case, there is an old body.
Yeah, and so yeah, I mean, there would be a you just like this, and there'd be another you just like this, but in a different place.
But where would I be?
Who is you? I mean, this is the thing. Like, they're
The fuck?
again. It's like it's this.
Do you know
illusion
though,
of you.
or are you just
No. Like, no. The point is that there's an illusion that there is a you. Like, the conscious experience of there being a you is just
okay?
a
Where's my
product.
perception? If there's two of me, so if they copied the exact replica, it's on a digital world
Yeah.
or whatever. Where's my perception?
I mean, you're still here, right? Like, your body is here, your brain is still here.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're perceiving just like you would be now.
But would my perception be in the digital world, or would
There's
it be
something
here?
perceiving in the digital world. Is it you? I mean, what do you consider you? Like, if I make a copy of you, are they both you?
But I think there's something important to be said about: is my perception going to be staying here, or is it going to be in that digital world?
There's a perception here, and there's a perception in the digital world. There's two perceptions.
So you're copying a perception.
Yeah, just like when you make a baby. Like does my
But
perception go to the baby?
But like,
I still perceive. So does
do
the
you
baby.
get what I'm saying though, or?
No, I mean, I think what you're thinking is that the perception is a thing that can be transferred through some conduit and like leaves behind a thing that doesn't perceive anymore.
Or it could stay there. Like, if I upload my mind into virtual reality, am I going to this perception that I am seeing right now and sensing in this physical reality? Will that transition to the digital reality where I'm going to be living the experience of the virtual reality?
What does it mean to upload? I mean, like in this sense. I mean, not like what does upload mean? But
Put
in this
computer
sense.
interface in my head, and then connect to the clouds in some virtual reality.
So is this, does it involve destruction of your brain?
No, like I just put the chip in my brain, and because the chip's in there, it can analyze my entire process of my brain, create a exact replica of
Copy.
brain
Okay.
that's able to perceive the virtual reality.
Yeah.
So now, am I going to be able to perceive this reality or the virtual reality?
So there's a copy of your brain, and there's your brain.
Yeah.
Right.
Because you're saying that, yes, there'll be two perceptions at that point, but this perception in the physical reality really wants to experience that virtual reality. But when I do that, when I upload, is it this perception that's going to be perceiving that one? Or is it just going to be still me stuck here on this simulation and not being able to experience that?
So if the model is you making a copy of your brain and putting it into the virtual reality, the thing that is the copy is what's experienced the virtual reality. You just got your brain copied, so like you're just sitting here.
You're sure about that?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Like what connects you to that? It's just a copy.
What if that character thing or that brain can't do anything unless it has my perception to be able to control it? Like it creates an exact replica. It wouldn't be though. If
it's an exact replica of you, you don't need a lower level something to control you. Like if it's an exact replica of you, it doesn't need anything.
Whoa, shit.
Yeah, I mean, like basically,
I don't know, man.
It comes down to like if you're gonna copy you, if it's a situation where you're like, oh, I'm gonna make a copy of my brain, and I'm going to make a copy of my brain that's digital, and then I'll be living that experience. Like that's not what happens. Like,
you don't think so?
No, I mean like
what's the point of it then? Like us creating
virtual
reality.
The point of copying a brain, like copying a brain in this is pretty much analogous like making a baby. Like you just made a new thing. It's conscious now. Like, and it's not tied to your experience. It just started out with a slice. Like a baby starts out with some initial slice, and it just goes from there. Like so does this thing. It just starts like in the middle of your life instead.
Okay. So
like there's still a you.
You don't think so? In order for me to actually experience that virtual reality, it would mean that I would have to kill this biological body and just live on in that virtual reality?
Well, there would be a you that died. It doesn't mean that like, so let's say we have you copy your brain, you upload it to the virtual reality. Killing you doesn't bring you there.
What would bring me there?
I mean, like actually,
or is it impossible?
Well, no, it's possible. It's possible. Like, so something that's like VR, like when you put on a headset, like it's reasonable to think that you could. I mean, like dreaming, or like just when you think about something, like you can imagine a reality. So like it makes sense to think that in the future there's a way that you could, or like when you trip on psychedelics, like experience is something that's made in your brain. So in theory, you can just send impulses in a very precise and particular way to like create a virtual experience. Like that's certainly possible, and that would be you experiencing it. Yeah. In the sense that you mean you. But yeah, like if it's a thing where you're copying you, like there's a you that's living on there, an entity that's living on there. There's no way for this to get inside of that. Like you just basically made a new baby, but just from the middle of its life instead.
Right.
Like it wouldn't make any sense to say like, how do I get into my baby's body? It's like you made a new thing. Like you don't get in there. It's like they have their own experience now.
So the idea of digital immortality, this idea that this perception of my life right now, I'm able to upload into the digital world, and because it's digital, and I'm not strapped to biology at that point because I've transcended biology, so to speak, that I would be able to, as long as that hardware continues on, be able to live on in that hardware for as long as the hardware continues to process.
Is that possible, you're saying? Or asking?
So the biggest holdup is trying to figure out what happens when we like in that transition from this physical reality to the digital reality. Like if we're going to be able to contain our perception of reality into the next body.
So the way
and if we can, then can we just like live on in forever?
Yeah. So the way that it would work is there is a you that continued the whole experience, which is the you that's in the cloud. Like it has all the memory, it has everything.
Yeah.
It's just that now there's another you that isn't there.
So that one will live on.
That
forever.
one, yeah, that one lives on and has the experience of continuation. It's like, wow, like I'm in the cloud now. This is great. And I have all the memories. It's like, wow, it really worked out well. But then there's still a you that's sitting here like copied, and it's like, oh well, what happens now? Like my brain just got copied, and it's like, so, yeah, it's like yeah, you're living on there.
So that's no different than me taking a video of myself, posting on the internet, and that video will live on for eternity. Well, as long as that internet stays around.
Yeah. I mean, like the you will continue, but now it's just now there's two yous.
So
two yous.
This idea of this perception right now, living for eternity, isn't that probably not possible?
It's you can get the illusion that it's possible basically by. I mean, basically, like the simulated one is doing that. That's what it is doing. And it's just a question of like, is there going to be two of you? Like, is there going to be one left over or not? Like, and this is basically goes back to the thought experiment of like, we assemble, we take all your atoms, and we reassure you, we're going to put you together back on the other end, and you're going to be good as new, right? We take apart all your atoms, and we build you on Mars, but out of silicon in a computer that's going to last forever. It's like, I made it, and no one had to die. It's great. It's like, but yeah, but like we took you apart. You know what I mean? It's like you died. You're not alive anymore.
But there's no difference between that and maybe going to sleep and waking up.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of analogous, and even like each second, you're different. Like I know I keep saying that, but like that's like it maps on directly to if you took apart all your atoms, put them together somewhere else. It's like, is it the same you now? Like how about like the next second? Is that still you? Like how about if we map all your brain, map your entire every relevant variable, and we project what the next second will be, like what your state will be in the next second, like how the physical play out and everything. And then instead of making the you that is now, we make the you that is a second in the future. It's like, well, whoa, like is that me now? Like it's just like there. I don't know how to I keep going back to it. Like there is no you. It's just like consciousness is just like the feeling of continuation.
It's an illusion.
Yeah. So like if you feel like your life is continued in a straight line, like yeah, you did it. Like you're in the cloud, and like the you that like if you copy yourself or if you like slowly transition into a digital format. Not leaving one of you behind. Like there is a you that continues on and feels like I made it. It's just either you have one left over or you don't.
Yeah.
Either you copy it or you transition from one into the other. But either way, you have an entity that feels like it continued on.
Okay, so similar to that. But like if I die right now and my biological makeup gets buried into the ground, but like when I die, that's like the question of, do I lose consciousness when I die, or does it continue on in some way?
Well, if you consider that consciousness is if you accept that consciousness is just a state of a brain
perception.
Yeah,
consciousness is me being able to feel this couch right now, be able like
I don't
observe what's happening.
I think it's beyond just raw perception, because like you could say a camera perceives things, but is it conscious? I think they're like slightly different, but I don't know if that's even
It's
relevant,
knowing that you're conscious. Like me knowing that I have consciousness is consciousness.
I think somebody said consciousness is like, it's that, I think this is a Sam Harris thing. You know Sam Harris for sure. So he said if there's something that it's like to be a thing, then it has consciousness. Like if there's something that it's like to be a bat, then it has consciousness. Like it's about the qualia, like the existence of like a quality of experience. Like like is there something that's like to be a camera? Like probably not.
Liked?
Something that's like what would it be like to be a camera? Like, can you imagine what it would be like to be a camera? Or what would it be like to be this drum pad?
But the same thing could be true with a tree. Can you like it's just sitting there. It's not doing anything.
Right, yeah.
But people say that trees have consciousness.
Well, depends on what you mean by consciousness, I guess. I mean, you can expand the definition so that it's no longer useful. I mean, like you can say everything's conscious, and then it's like, okay, well, what's the word for like, it's like something to be a thing? It's like, well, we need a new word now because everything's conscious now.
But qualia is that word. Qualia?
Qualia is like it's like a dimension of it's like the quality of an experience.
Okay.
Not quality as in like a value judgment, like it's good or bad, but quality as in like something is soft and it feels soft. Or this is not soft, but
And animals have that then?
Consciousness. I guess, man, we don't really know for sure. Like I don't even know if you have consciousness. Like I feel conscious.
That's true. I don't know if you're conscious.
I might not be, dude. I don't know. But sorry, we're like in a different place now. I forget what we were starting with.
Sam Harris saying that qualia.
Oh yeah, so
something.
Yeah, so consciousness is there's something that's like to be something as consciousness. But
death, afterlife, like what happens to it.
Right, yeah. So yeah, thank you. So yeah, if you consider that consciousness is just an emergent thing out of a certain brain state, imagine there's a set of brain states that consciousness can emerge out of, right? When you die, your brain state goes outside of those bounds.
Yeah, because now it's like in the ground.
Well, now it's like, I mean, for instance, like it's not getting oxygen. Like your nerves aren't firing anymore. Like if you have nerves that aren't firing, like you're not going to have consciousness emerge out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So now that your brain is outside of the set of brain states that consciousness can emerge from, I mean, there's just no consciousness anymore. It's like you'd be no more conscious than this. Right. It's just like there's not. You're like your brain state is not within the set of emerging consciousness.
What do they call that? Like abiogenic, like biogenic being like life form. Abiogenic, or like the word for inorganic. It's inorganic material. Yes.
Well, I mean, it's like it's still organic technically. Like I mean, amino acids are organic. Like your brain is organic still, but it's
just dead.
It's just dead. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, like as basic as you can get it, it's like your brain is not occupying a state that is within the set of states that consciousness can emerge out of. So when you're dead, like you're just not within that set anymore. There's no consciousness. Like, consciousness can't emerge from a state that's outside of the set of.
But then it could reemerge.
In theory,
or where does it go?
Yeah. So in theory, we could take a dead brain, and with really precise tweezers, move all the atoms and stuff like back into a place where it's conscious. Like because again, like imagine we can scan a brain and we can get all the relevant variables. Like we could take a dead brain and just make it look like the brain that is conscious, and it would be conscious.
Mm-hmm.
So, in theory, yeah, you could take a dead brain and make it alive, but like you need some really small tweezers for that. And where does it go? Like it doesn't really go anywhere. Like it's not. It's it's sort of like where does happiness go? Like if you like if you're feeling good and then someone's like, hey, your cat died, like where did the happiness go? Like did your cat run off with it when it died, or like did it leak out like in the tears or something? Like
but then it reemerges.
It's kind of the same question. It's like happiness is a thing that exists but not in a material sense.
So what's giving rise to it is, well, the material is the chemical.
It exists
the dopamine.
in a subjective space, I guess.
So
anything that's it exists in a subjective space, like when you die, it doesn't need to go anywhere. Like it was only there because you were running a software that produced it.
So the
like
hardware,
consciousness or like happiness or sadness, like it only exists in your experience, which is like, I guess you could say like a virtual realm.
like an iPhone. Like you can only, an app only exists because the hardware is allowing it for it to.
Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah.
But the difference is that is the iPhone doesn't have, or the app doesn't have qualia. Well,
the thing that's kind of weird about that analogy is that like the app is obviously stored like on a hard drive, like it's physically stored, but the analogy kind of works, but really like I don't know if there's a better one, but if you like the consciousness doesn't need to go anywhere. I guess this is like a question that the people find unanswered, and they're like, oh, so like it must be heaven or something. Like where does the consciousness go when you die? Like you're not conscious there. Like where does it go?
Yeah,
it doesn't need to go anywhere. Like it only exists because it only exists because like your hardware is running a software that feels that way. Like it doesn't actually exist in the objective universe, like in an objective reality.
But it's just weird that I'm limited to only one perception of that, one qualia,
like one life.
Yeah,
like one body kind of thing.
Yeah.
Why is that weird?
Because is it like saying I'm programmed to only be able to have one experience, like one lifetime? At least that's what I know of right now. Like it also, like what happened to all the other lifetimes that I came from?
Yeah.
Why is it just this one?
Well, yeah, I mean, think about like if the universe continues on for some infinite time or something, like you can imagine that all of the molecule, all the atoms that make up your body, all the subatomic particles even that make up your body, were broken apart and decomposed in the earth, and then the solar system was dissolved and the particles scattered all over the place, and then somehow like reassembled into another body. Like, is that you reincarnated?
To make it a little bit more practical, like if I died right now and I wanted to become a tree, or not wanted to, a tree emerged from my biology into an apple, and then a mother ate that apple and then gave rise to another child. Like, is my consciousness now a part of that new child, or that child?
Right. Yeah. So I would say no, because the consciousness, again, like what consciousness is to me is like the experience of like continuation, and there's no continuation in that. Like you broke down all the atoms and they got reassembled in a totally like chaotic way.
But in your way, you're saying that something different or the same. With the universe like exploding and then somehow reemerging a new.
No, I was. I mean, what we said was sort of similar. I was saying like it wouldn't make sense to think that it was to show that there's not like a continuation there.
So
like,
once I die, I won't have a perception of that next life form.
Yeah, because there's no like.
Whoa.
Because you basically you is like your memories. Like you only exist because you remember your past, basically. Like the you that you're talking about, the you that you're asking if it goes to the computer, like into the digital realm, only exists because you remember your past. Which is why this one in the digital realm feels like it continued, because it remembers its past. That's basically what you is.
But then, okay, so that one that went to the virtual reality that could live on for infinity, right?
As long as the computers are on.
As long as the computers are on. Like we said earlier, like history repeating itself, like if that's the case, in we're potentially in a simulation right now, like, who's to say that we couldn't live on for the so-called eternity until the computer that's giving rise to this simulation dies? Like, doesn't that sound a little
yeah
little crazy?
so
But
we, as in the
like me right now, I could be being created by a supercomputer, and I'm a digital avatar in a simulation that we're living right now, and the whole idea of age and dying from age, like, might not apply to me because I'm a digital entity, and I will only die until the supercomputer dies.
Yeah. So this goes back to, like, if we assume that the simulation is a thing, then we can plug in a bunch of interesting, interesting rules that are counter to what we think the world is actually like. So, like, for instance, like what you're saying, I think it sounds something like, if we're in a simulation, maybe like our bodies are, like, all of biology is just like simulated, and like maybe there's like something that is consciousness, like is actually you, that's just inhabiting a body, and that follows logically, but again, it's like in the realm of, like, we don't know that.
And what if when I die, it's just because the supercomputer is dying and, like, blowing up, and it's simulating age, and it's making me wrinkled and stuff like that just because it's trying to trick me in that narrative that the simulation is programmed to.
Yeah, I mean, definitely possible, and like follows logically, but again, it's in that realm that we just don't know.
None of this whole conversation was pointless.
No, it wasn't. No.
We don't know anything.
No. Well, I really enjoyed, like, especially the part about I really enjoy thought experiments about, like, I mean, thought experiments in general are just great because it's like they really poke at, like, tough concepts in interesting ways and really help you to, like, figure out what you actually think. Like the one about taking your body and, like, deconstructing it and reconstructing it somewhere else, and like how that relates to consciousness. Like, is there a continuation there or not? Like, it kind of points you in that direction. It's like, well, what is consciousness about? And, like, to me, it seems like it's about the, like, experience of continuation, which is why, like, I maybe I talked to you about this, I forget who it was, but I was thinking about what it would be like to have no memory at all, like, of your past at all. So basically your like, no conscious memory of your past, I guess. Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like that's me. I have terrible memory.
No, but I mean none at all. Like, even like the last, like, just now. Like, if you were living, like, frame by frame,
that's
basically.
real. Like some patients,
yeah,
like trauma patients,
right,
have that.
And so try to imagine what that experience would be like. Like, is there an experience there? Is there something that it's like to be that person?
You're living in the present all the time.
Yeah, but, like, what does that feel like?
Okay, this is where we use metaphors.
Like, when I try to imagine this, I was like, that's probably what it's
like.
like.
Oh, dreaming. It's like dreaming. Every
you don't remember what just happened. Like, in a dream, you remember that, like, you walked out of the bank. You know?
Yeah, but, like, it's like reliving new memories, essentially. Like, when you go to sleep and you dream, it's a new memory every night. I don't dream. I don't really have that experience. Either, but, like, the concept of dreaming, like, you go to sleep, you dream, it's a new experience, you wake up, the next dream that you have is totally different from the dream that you had before. Like, maybe in that dream, you know but, like, just trying to hint to what you're saying, the feeling of what it would be like. Yeah, it'd be like new experiences that are, like, disparate. Like,
yeah, but even in a dream, there's like so it's something like this set of, like, one dream and then another dream that's totally different. Yeah, but, like, there wouldn't even be a feeling of difference though, because you don't remember the last one.
Well, do you ever compare?
You can't.
When you're in a dream, you don't compare your dream of a different dream when you're in the dream. At least that's not what I hear from people.
Yeah, no, I don't either. But
it's like they take that as, like, a snapshot of, like, that was it.
Yeah.
and take it for what it is.
I'm just saying that like there's no way to compare right now to what just happened because you don't remember anything at all. Like to me, that sounds like what it's like to be a rock or like a drumstick. Like there's just no, it's not conscious. Like
that sounds peaceful.
There's no continuation in anything.
Yeah.
So like I don't know how they're like my understanding of consciousness is really rooted in like that there's a feeling of continuation. So like if there's not continuation, I don't see how there's consciousness.
Right.
Like if it's just like new slices of reality every moment without any recollection of what just happened. Obviously there's no feeling of continuation there.
Having this,
it's just sort of like experience falling over itself. Like,
yeah,
I don't know. I just can't imagine that there's a consciousness, that there's anything.
Well, the only thing you
like
experience is the present moment at all times, every time.
Yeah.
Which is it's weird to think, but that's what like the yogis are trying to achieve. That state of complete presence all the time.
Yeah.
So they're no different than a rock.
And what is it like? Yeah, I mean,
they're trying to achieve a state of a rock.
Yeah. It's very, but even, I guess I don't know. I've never been enlightened or whatever that is.
Makes you think that. Well, for me, it like is kind of inspiring to just want to experience that before I die.
Yeah, but I mean, you wouldn't. I don't know if you'd experience it. Well, in
the same way as other people. Or...
Well, in the way that like if it's set up so that you're only experiencing the present moment, like, does that allow you to store the memory for later to look at, or maybe? But
have you ever achieved flow state? You probably have, like with music and stuff. Like
or like with jujitsu or like climbing or something. Like the only thing you're thinking about is like what you're doing just then. Yeah.
So it might be that.
Yeah, it's probably something close to that, but I wonder if like it gets. I think that is something like a. I imagine it's sort of like you have like a scale. So like there's like a wall here, right? So this is sort of like what light is like. So light, as it moves, which is it? So as light moves faster and faster, light moves the same speed all the time. As you get closer and closer to the speed of light, time compresses. So, like
in the movies where it like, and then launches off. Like if you're going light speed.
I mean, it compresses like, as in time is like goes by quicker.
Oh.
So like, and this is actually like, I don't know if there's anything that, I don't think humans go fast enough so that it's really noticeable. I know that, for instance, like gravity affects this too, which is a little tangent, but gravity affects time also. So like, the satellites that are in space have to be adjusted because their time has to be adjusted because they'll be out of sync with clocks on Earth because the gravity is different, which is really weird. But anyway, so as you move faster, time compresses. So it takes like compared to someone who is not moving, it takes less time for something to happen for you than it does for them. So basically, like you get faster, and there's a wall here, right? So light. This is the speed of light, this wall. Like nothing can go faster than this. And light experiences, like if it were to experiences its whole life in an instant. Like the whole universe is just an instant. Like
because it went so fast.
Not a very short period of time. I mean instantly. Mm-hmm. Like it's all the same time. Like all events are happening at the same time.
Which is like the fourth dimension. Or time is the fourth dimension.
That's what time is the fourth dimension, I guess. But yeah, so it all happens at once. And so this is kind of how I imagine this state of like not remembering your past at all, where flow state is kind of like you're moving very near the speed of light. But like if you were to actually go the speed of light, it would all just happen like in an instant. And I don't know. And I don't think like you don't experience time then, basically.
But like when
And
you're
so
in
I don't know
flow
if you
state,
experience.
when you're in the flow state, are you thinking about anything? Like from my experience, if I'm like skateboarding, I'm like super in the moment
Yeah.
and I'm not thinking of my past or the future. It's just me and the board.
Yeah.
Or like surfing, rock climbing, anything like that.
Yeah.
So because you're not thinking about anything except that present moment, then could we assume that you're not having memories?
I don't know. I mean, it's pretty speculative, and like I don't know if I could. I don't know if it's might be testable. I don't know, but if I just think it's very interesting to try to imagine what it would be like to not be able to remember anything, and my intuition tells me that it would be something like not consciousness, like I don't know. It's really hard to imagine.
Well, just like
but
that.
Maybe it would be like being very present all the time.
Yeah. Well, like having this conversation and then thinking about Neuralink, it just makes me consider that what Musk is doing is like probably one of the most revolutionary things that we're going to experience in our lifetime. Because it's really hitting on what is consciousness, what can we manipulate in consciousness, and then are we able to achieve different brain states or states of consciousness where it's like what you're talking about, like erasing someone's memory, essentially, and still having them like exist in that experience. You could potentially do that with a Neuralink.
Yeah, I can see how that'd be possible. Yeah. Like in theory, yeah, you could shut off just someone's like
memory bank.
Yeah, just like yeah. I mean, I guess it sounds like in theory possible. I don't know how complicated like the storage of memory is. Like I know like we know about the hippocampus is where memories are made, but it's not so complicated. It's not so simple so that like your memories are in one place and like you can just cut that out. Like I think it's more complicated. It's like your memories are kind of everywhere. So like I don't know if you can cut around them carefully or like if they're totally integral to like its overall function, but might be possible to do that. But yeah, Neuralink, very important, very revolutionary thing.
I feel like without having these in-depth conversations, like I'm led to believe that it's an easy write-off. Like, oh, Musk, what he's doing, like, it doesn't really make sense. It's not something really worth considering right now. But then you like really think about all of this kind of stuff, and it's like, I don't know, and it's like either like very trivial or like super meaningful, and there's like very little in between.
Yeah.
Or at least that's my experience with.
Yeah,
like,
I feel
about
like it's like that. It's like there's two ends of it where it's like that's like a waste of time. It's like or maybe there's like a sort of halfway point where it's like, oh, that's interesting, but like yeah, there's kind of like that doesn't concern me. Like I'm late for a meeting,
Right.
And then there's like, huh, interesting, and then there's like, wow, this is like when you really understand what's happening, it's like, wow, that's pretty.
Because at the end of the day, like all of our experiences are confined to consciousness. So if you can manipulate consciousness, then you can have the power of changing your entire human experience.
Mm-hmm. That's what's on the way, I guess.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, it's already 2 hours.
That was 2 hours?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know it was so long.
Did you have anything you had to do tonight?
All right, I gotta eat. I'm hungry again.
All right, let's eat.
Yeah. All right, dope.
Peace. So there you have it. Thanks again for tuning in to Bindlism, a philosophy to self-sufficient lifestyle. Be sure to explore other episodes of Bindlism on our Spotify and Apple podcast. You can find more Boho Hobo stuff on Instagram and Twitter at boho_hobo_, as well as on our Facebook page at Boho Hobo Lifestyle. It'd also be dope if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Our YouTube channel has more episodes from Bindlism in video form, along with other random shenanigans that we're up to. We're constantly filming new experiences, so it's one way you guys can stay up to date with us in our journey. So yeah, I guess that's it for now. Until next time, peace.